Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing well. It is a horrible morning here in the south of England. It's proper autumnal morning. We've had a few days of nice weather, or at least where I'm located, and now it's dark, it's wet, it's windy, it's gloomy, it's autumn. This is my favourite season, but having a few days of it being, nice weather, and then all of a sudden it's not just dark because obviously days are shorter and such. I've had to put the lights on in order for you to see me. It's that dark outside. So it's it's a bit gloomy today. It's been a couple of weeks since you last saw me. I had my lovely holiday. I still had a few days of it left last time you saw me, which I really enjoyed. I bought some stuff for the house. I spent time with my mum and dad. I went to the cinema, went to see Lee. That was a really great film that I wanted to see, and I had lunch out, and I bought myself some books because I was on holiday and such. And then it was back to work, and the extra books that I bought I've got here by my side to very quickly show you. So the first one is called The Greatest Nobodies of History by Adrian Bliss, where he looks at people who did various things like Ancient Athens' most annoying resident, the trusted toilet servants of Henry VIII, Leonardo da Vinci's favourite ferret, the most political tree in England, and the horse who stole Queen Victoria's hat. So I was like, let's go for this. I saw him advertising it for Audible, and I just thought I wanted to give it a go. So that's the first one. Then we have The Fortunes of Olivia Richmond by Louise Davidson, which again Audible pulled me in, and it just so happened it was weird. I just walked into Waterstones and all of these books were there, and I was like, it's a sign I have to buy them rather than getting the Audible, because I was going to get the Audible version. But I ended up buying the physical books. So the second one is The Fortunes of Olivia Richmond. Then we have a autobiography, and it's of Matthew Perry. Obviously, given what happened to him was extremely sad. And I've been a fan of Friends since I was a teenager and such, but I never actually read his book. I've heard him give interviews, I've heard him talk about the book, other people talk about the book, but I never read it. And it was in buy one get one half price offer, and I picked it up and I started reading it, and I found it really intriguing, and I thought, I'm on holiday, fuck it, I'm going to buy it. So Matthew Perry's autobiography, Friends, Lovers, and The Big Terrible Thing. And the other book in the buy one get one half price offer was The Winter Spirits, Ghostly Tales for Frosty Nights, where this is a series of short stories written by many authors, all names of which are on these lovely leaves. And it's just kind of spooky, ghostly stories, and a few of them are very interesting big names. So I'm like, go for it, including Laura Purcell, and you know how I love her books, so had to go for that one. And of course I had to go for the other short collection book, which they also have available at Waterstones, called The Haunting Season, Ghostly Tales for Long Winter Nights. And again, each of these leaves has the name of an author whose stories are in this collection. So I got that. So I'm very excited to add these 5 to the jar. Oh no, I just realized one of them is I'm showing you the page side, not the spine side. There we go. So I'm very excited to add each of these to my to be read jar and such, and take it from there. So alright, so that's the catch up with me of what's been going on. Back at work, all that jazz and everything. And over the past 2 weeks, I have been reading a certain book, and that book is Storyteller, The Life of Roald Dahl by Donald Sturrock. So I bought this from the Cheltenham Literature Festival, I think a good 10 years ago. There was an event about Roald Dahl. I can't remember if it was Donald solely or if it was like a panel, but I have a feeling it might have been a panel because I'm sure there were other people talking about Roald Dahl's influence on their lives as writers and such. So yeah, so I think rather than just like the interviewer who was interviewing Donald saying that to them, so I think there were multiple. So it seems more likely it was a panel. And I found Donald's take on Roald Dahl really interesting. I'd never read a book about Roald Dahl before, so I bought it. It went on my bookshelf, and I've never picked it up until now. And I have a feeling it's been now on my bookshelf for about 10 years, so about time I got round to it. So my interactions, if that's the way to say it, my love for Roald Dahl began, as many of us did, in childhood. I really loved listening to his stories, and I think because I always like kind of like dark, twisty, more sinister stories, as you can tell from the books that I read. I think I was just drawn to him for that darkness, and there was something so amazing about how all of his stories, how evil and sinister and horrible the adults were, and how strong and independent and how amazing the children were. But also he used intelligence as a key element of winning over the dark, nasty stuff. And I think I think you can see that very clearly in a lot of his stories, where if you think about it, like Matilda, James and the Giant Peach, because of the way Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker and getting the peach off the tree and everything, and the adventure that they go off on and everything, and he uses his intelligence to navigate them and such to where they need to go. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, for the smart yet dumb things that Charlie does during the course of that book. What else? Estio-Trot. I loved Estio-Trot so much. Crazy. Using using a poem to make a turtle get bigger and bigger and bigger, tortoise, sorry, and swapping them out on the balcony, actually replacing them with smaller ones to larger ones to make them big in order to get the heart of Mrs. Silver and such. But also Keeley, Fantastic Mr. Fox. Fantastic Mr. Fox is my favourite, my absolute favourite of his books. It's really weird. I was actually thinking this morning what my favourite Roald Dahl books, and the three that instantly popped into my head was Fantastic Mr. Fox, James and the Giant Peach, and George's Marvellous Medicine. And being a book lover, I'm sure you might go, well, what about Matilda? I did love Matilda. I love Matilda. Still to this day, I have a copy of it upstairs. But the thing is that Matilda was my sister's favourite book, and I felt like, well, that's her one, I've got to have my own one. So, Fantastic Mr. Fox just caught my attention straight away. I love how Fantastic Mr. Fox outsmarts the three farmers, and how he saves not only his family, but all the other animal families around. It's just absolutely brilliant. But anyway, enough about that. So I've had a passion for Roald Dahl's books since I was young, as many of us do. I think I've got nearly the majority of his children's books on my Audible account. I love listening to the audiobooks of them. They're really well done. The actors that they've chosen to do all the readings are brilliant. My favourite is Matilda, Kate Winslet. She's so good doing that audiobook. Her voices are brilliant. All of them are great, but my favourite is Kate Winslet, because she really gets into that audiobook. But yes, so from a young age, I've loved Roald Dahl, but I've never read a book about him. I knew things about him, obviously, as I grew up, but there were aspects of things that at the same time I didn't know about. And right at the beginning of the book, it's really interesting. There is a quote of his that says, "I don't lie, I merely make the truth a little more interesting. I don't break my word, I'd merely bend it slightly." And Donald actually talks about, particularly if you look at his autobiographical books, Boy and Going Solo, and he says, "As a writer, he was the most unreliable of witnesses, particularly when he spoke or wrote about himself. In Boy, his own evocative and zestful memoir of childhood, he begins by disparaging most autobiography as full of all sorts of boring details. His book, he insists, will be no history, but a series of memorable impressions simply skimmed off the top of his consciousness and set down on paper. These vignettes of childhood are painted in bold colours and leap vividly off the page. They are infused with detail that is often touching and always devoid of sentiment. Each adventure or escapade is retold in the intimate spirit of one child telling another a story in the playground. The language is simple and elegant. Humour is to the fore. Self-pity is entirely absent. Some instances are funny, some are painful, and some are unpleasant," he declares of his memories, concluding theatrically, "all are true." In fact, almost all are, to some extent, fiction. The semblance of veracity is achieved by Dahl's accurate observational eye, which adds authenticity to the most fantastical of tales, and by a remarkable trove of 906 letters which he kept at his side as he wrote. These were letters that were written to his mother throughout his life, and which she hoarded carefully, preserving them through the stores of war and countless changes of address. So, it's almost like he uses his imagination to keep stuff still personal to himself, but he likes to tell some tales. And Donald actually knew Roald. He knew him for about 6 months of his life, and he talks about all of the pleasant times he spent at the house with the family and such. And after Roald died in, was it 93, I think it was, it was a case of they discovered so much stuff that they didn't know existed, like those 906 letters. Family didn't even know about them until after he died. After he died, there was a notebook that got found, which is talked about in detail in this book, simply titled Olivia. And Olivia was Roald's third child with his wife, Pat. At the time was the youngest, because after Olivia passed away very, very sadly of measles when she was, I think she was about 5, from what I can remember. He wrote down what happened to her, how he found out the news that she had died. It's very to the point, it's blunt, it's brutal. He just wrote it down in a notebook, titled it Olivia, put it at the back of the drawer, locked the drawer, and it didn't get open for 28 years. And it's startling to read how he wrote about her. That, yeah, they discovered all of this stuff that they didn't know. Even though he was an open book and he told stories and did that, the other, there's all of this extra information. And Donald got picked by the family. The family knew him. He spent 6 months with them. The family picked him to write this book and gave him access to all the documents. So he is writing about sources that other biographers who had come before him have never had access to, didn't know existed. So this is a treasure trove of sources. Now, for the actual reading, I enjoyed the reading process, but it took me 2 weeks to read it. It is a heavy book, but Roald Dahl had a heavy life. He was born in Wales, but grew up in England to Norwegian immigrants, and Norway was very important to him and such, and every summer he would go to Norway to spend time with his Norwegian family. And while he was young and such, he was very, very close to his mother. He had a couple of sisters, and one tragically died. Well, oh no, I've got the age wrong. I've just realised. No, Olivia was like 3 when she died, and his sister who died was about 5 or 6. I'm getting their ages muddled up. I'm so sorry about that. So yeah, he lost a sister young, and his father died when he was young as well. So when he was growing up, living in his imagination helped him, cope with things. And there is this wonderful story and a drama of it I highly, highly recommend, which I'll talk about in a bit. He met Beatrix Potter. He actually went to her house, went to her farm to talk to her because he liked her books. I love that story. I think it's a wonderful story. That 2 writers who would change the course of children's literature met. I love that story. But yeah, he grew up in his imagination and such. He went off to boarding school in England, so he got separated from his mum. So these kind of like tales and stuff that he would tell of things that he got up to would entertain her and such. But he didn't like write story as in he was writing books because he planned to be an author or anything like that. It was just something fun. And then as he got older, war was declared. He had this incredible career as a fighter pilot and such. And then after the war, after he was injured out and such, he turned to writing, and he found that he could tell these fantastical tales that children just responded to, and his career just took off. But also the thing about Roald Dahl, I think he understood that even though you can write fantastical tales, children want to know the truth. Children need to know about realities of life and the darkness of life in order to prepare them for adulthood. And I think that's why he stands out from other children's authors, or he is the king of this, as it were, because if you think about it, every single one of his children's books has nastiness in it. And even when he did Revolting Rhymes, where he did takes on kind of like retellings, as it were, of old like grim fairy tales, he brought back that essence of darkness. So when you read the grim storytales as adults, you go, oh my god, these are nasty. Like the fact that like in Cinderella, for the ugly sisters, in order to get their feet to fit in the glass slipper, they chop off like their heels and such. It is nasty, and like birds peck their eyes out, and so it's nasty stories which have become Disneyfied and nice stuff, and even though there is darkness to them, it's still kind of pleasant and kids read them and stuff. And Roald Dahl went, nah, I'm not going to do that. And his Revolting Rhymes book is chef's kiss. I love it. But yeah, he talks about death and murder and blackmail and abuse of multiple different levels in each of his books. But they're written in a way that the children can read it and understand the difference between goodness and badness. And when you read them as an adult, you can really see he's talking about things that until probably, well, you could say now, that children's authors don't really talk about in such a bold manner. And Roald Dahl was doing that from the beginning. And so I think he should be recognised for that, and he is recognised for that. But I really think that he really did children, and still does children, a great service by being blunt and truthful. Because especially if you think about it, he grew up in a time where there was a lot of death, there was war, there was diseases that we have eradicated now, that got exposed to all the time. There was that possibility that, okay, yes, it was like the 1920s, but still you could, it wasn't like, you know, Tudor time or whatever, but you still could contract an illness and be dead within days that we don't have anymore. There was the possibility of dying and such was constantly around. And he went through a lot of stuff. As I said, you know, he lost his sister and he lost his father when he was very young. He had this incredible career as a pilot that lost people along the way. He lost his third child, Olivia, to the measles when she was 3. His eldest son, Theo, got into a serious accident when his pram was hit by a taxi. And thankfully he survived, but they realised that the medical piece, the shunt that he required to alleviate pressure on his brain and such, had a technical fault. So what did he do? He redesigned it entirely, had this new shunt with his engineer friend from when he was a pilot, and the Great Ormond Street Hospital doctor who was an expert in that area redesigned this shunt, which was then given and used to help the lives of 3,000 children. Incredible. What else happened? Pat, his first wife, suffered a horrific stroke when she was pregnant with their 5th child, and she is actually the inspiration for the BFG, because it took a very, very long time for her to get back to normality afterwards, but she permanently had this issue where she would get her words muddled. And that is why if you read the BFG and he says weird and wonderful things in his sentences, or he elongates words, or he scrambles, or he has a word and he scrambles up the letters within them to form this new thing, but you know kind of what they're talking about. That is inspired by his wife Pat, and this terrible stroke that she suffered. You know, he went through a lot of stuff in his life, and obviously that is away from his career and everything. And I can understand he was a person who, I've got to be in control of this, I've got to I need to go through this. He was very much, do not let your emotions get in the way of things, just do what you've got to do. And that was true for everything kind of in his life apart from Olivia, because Olivia falling ill and suddenly dying of measles was, she'd already died by the time he found out that she was ill, and he was away, so he had no control. He couldn't take control of the situation. He managed to get back to home, and he got told she's dead, and he went into the hospital room and kissed her goodbye and such, and he was like, but she's still warm. He couldn't process it, and that was the one time that it felt like he was completely out of control. And bless him for, you know, what he went through, the turmoil he went through with that. But other than that, he's very much, I am in control, I'm doing this, that and the other. And if you can feel that through the book, that he needed to process things in his own way. And yeah, he was an interesting guy, but he was rather problematic at the same time for a multitude of reasons. But there were some things I can understand why things happened, and other times I can't. So, for example, his second wife, Lissy, short, Felicity is her name, but shortened to Lissy. He had a 10-year love affair with her, and then their relationship got exposed. Pat left Roald, divorced him, and he married Lissy. And about, I don't know, I think it was, it might have been more like 7 or 8 years after their marriage, he writes the BFG, which is, as I said, inspired by Pat. It talks about, the family life and everything that that he had with his children. He tried out, actually, if you've read the BFG, the whole thing of blowing dreams through a window in a big horn. He actually acted that out for his children to see how they would react and such in their bedrooms and such. And that was, an inspiration kind of thing for him to go ahead with it. His granddaughter, Sophie Dahl, is who the character of Sophie is named after. So it encompasses so much of his life with his children and his first wife and everything, just completely encompasses it. And then he dedicates it to his second wife. And it just feels weird and awkward to me that he did that. And I never, as a child, realized that. I never noticed who it was dedicated to. I never asked why. I never, but then why would I, as a child, do that? And yeah, rethinking over his stories and in his timeline of what was happening in his life and the things that he is writing about, it's very, very interesting when you can plot someone's writing career alongside their personal life and things that are going on and the shifts in patterns that you can see. And Donald actually does that very, very intelligently, very beautifully throughout the course of the book. He tells you exactly what Roald is writing about at the times of these things happening, and that made the process easier and such. As I said, though, even though this is an easy read, it's a lot. And sometimes Donald, he really gets bogged down with things where I'm like, okay, so something that I find interesting about Roald's life, he goes over very, very quickly. And then other things, he is like writing about meeting after meeting and discussion about discussion, especially about like things like adaptations of his works and his back and forth with Walt Disney and such. And I'm like, I just feel like sometimes sometimes I feel like Donald is focusing on things that he didn't necessarily need to focus on so much. And other times it felt like, are you keeping that part of Roald's life or his thought process out of the picture because you don't want to upset the family, quite possibly? I mean, let's face it, as currently, actually, there's a stage play in London called Giant at the moment that's on. I think it's only like a couple of months or something, with John Lithgow playing Roald Dahl, which talks about things about his problematic views about the world and various things, but also what an interesting man he was and how his imagination worked and how he presented the world to children. Roald Dahl is an enigma. He will always be an enigma. But yeah, I like that someone else is approaching his story and seeing what their take on it is. But I think it would be a case of, I don't know if this is the case, but if I were to look at multiple biographies of Roald Dahl, I think all of them would see him in a slightly different light. But that's the nature of writing, that every writer will pick up and focus on someone and see something different. But I think because Roald in himself was such an enigma and that he kept cards close to his chest and let his version of events be the one that you get to see, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the truth. So there's always feels like, even though we know a load of stuff about him, we know an interpretation of that, we don't necessarily know the truth. And that's why he will always be an enigma. So I love the fact that he wrote all of this amazing stuff for children. He adored his children, didn't adore other people's children though. He wasn't all that fond about going off to like do readings for children and meet them and such, because he was quite a private guy. But at the same time, like I said, he would sit and tell you these fanciful stories and such, and you're like, he's a contradiction. He's an enigma. He's so interesting to be drawn to you. But at the same time, I kind of want to pull back a bit from him, because I'm going like, why did you think that was okay? What? I find him so intriguing, Roald Dahl. I really do. And reading his biography is in no way made me feel any negative feelings towards him. But I've just gone, okay, that's interesting. But I think now, if I were to re-listen to all of those audiobooks, like I said, that I've got on Audible of his, and think about what he was doing at the time that he was writing those books, I think I might see them in a slightly different way for a while. But that's not going to stop my love for them. It's just, yeah, he was an interesting man. I think Donald researched this very well. You can tell he spent a long time researching it. That it feels very personal, and especially the moments where the darkness goes out, really takes over and the light goes out, like with Olivia dying, with his own death, with the accident that Theo had. You can feel the emotion. You really can. And I found myself welling up at the end with his death. He had a tumultuous relationship with his children, especially after his relationship with their mother, Pat, broke down. And the way kind of he was able to sort of stabilize it before his end, that was tough to read. That was really tough to read. But I'm glad that got written in this book. And yeah, it's a hard biography to read, yet it's written in a really easy way. There are sections that are too bogged down, but there's sections that go too quick. Sometimes it feels like it's too detailed. Sometimes it's got hardly any detail. This book is an enigma, just like Roald Dahl in a way. So yeah, I totally understand why people really respond to this biography. But at the same time, there were parts that didn't really quite work for me. But as I said, it's a celebration of a life of an extraordinary man. So yeah, I can't help but say then that I liked it. So those are my thoughts on Storyteller, the life of Roald Dahl. Now, before I go, obviously, as I mentioned, all of his books on Audible that are read by various actors and such are absolutely brilliant. Check them out. They're so good. The drama, I will include a link to the trailer in the description, was about that when he was like 6 years old, he met Beatrix Potter by going to his house and went off on this kind of adventure to go meet her. Now, that drama, they have done kind of what Roald Dahl would have done as well, in that they switched up his age, they tweaked some things, they made a bit chronological order a bit out of sync. And yeah, but it's so full of references for his imagination, his future stories. Like, I love the bit where this woman is wearing a fox scarf and it comes to life and it's the fantastic Mr. Fox and he's telling him things and such and having a conversation in his imagination with this fox. It's just things like that. I just absolutely loved it. And yeah, and Dawn French plays Beatrix Potter, who at that time she was, she lived, I think she's about, oh gosh, actually, you know what, I'm going to look it up. I can't remember the exact year in which It is set, so let me just check. But John French plays her, and she plays her absolutely beautifully. Beatrix, Roald and Beatrix, The Tale of the Curious Mouse is what it's called. It was released in 2020. And what year is it set in? 1922. Okay, so in that case, Beatrix Potter, she would have been I was thinking she must have been about 60. Yeah, she would have been nearing 60 at that point. So yeah, and it's such a sweet little drama. I absolutely love it. I'll include the link to the trailer as mentioned in the description below for you to look at and do if you want to. But yeah, I'd highly recommend Roald Dahl's book. I know that he's a problematic guy, and if you feel uncomfortable reading his books because of that, that's your prerogative. That's whatever. It's entirely up to you. But I think he's a fascinating enigma, as mentioned, and yeah, the controversy of his books being rewritten for more appropriate modern language, that was just a train wreck of a situation. I was very much on the side, no, you should not rewrite his works. He would be livid if you did that. And I'm so glad that the publishers decided to change their mind on that situation, because yeah, it was ridiculous them rewriting what they were planning to rewrite. I know the books do have get reviewed after some time to see about taking out problematic writing. That it was just, but the things that they were planning to rewrite his books to say were ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, I felt. So yeah, I'm glad that they decided to not do that in the end. Good decision. So time to ask my question, because I've been going on for 37 minutes, my god. So would I read this again? Yes, I think I would. It might be a while before I read it, just simply, as I said, because it was quite a bulky, it's a hefty read, this. Yeah, there's a lot going on in this book, but I think I would read it again. Yeah. Would I recommend this to anyone? Yeah, I think I would, given that it was written with access to loads and loads of documents that no one had ever had access to before. I think that's why it's deemed as such a important biography of Roald Dahl. So yeah, I think, yeah, definitely recommend it, especially if someone's wanting to research Roald Dahl and such more in depth. Would I read any more of Donald Sturrock's work? Yeah, I think I would. I don't actually know if he has got any other books. That I do love the fact that I forgot to mention Quentin Blake, who did all the artwork for Roald Dahl's books. He worked with him a lot. He knew him very, very well. Is within this, and he is quoted on the back. And it says, "Irresistible. I thought I knew quite a lot about Roald Dahl, but now I know so much more. Sturrock's books lucidly describes a complicated life and relates to it the richness of Dahl's storytelling." So the fact that Quentin Blake, who knew and worked with Roald Dahl for years, and you know, that still does, you know, the illustrations for all of his books, said, I thought I knew him and I didn't until I read this. That tells you how much detail and such and that is in this book. So yeah. So yeah, I think I'd look into Donald's other books, but I don't know what other books he's written. So there we go. I'm going to stop now. Those are my thoughts on Storyteller, The Life of Roald Dahl by Donald Sturrock. If you read this book, I'd love to know what you think. Leave your comments below. You can thumbs up, thumbs down, tag together. So I've had my thoughts on my next read, which is Catherine Cookson's The Gambling Man. We're back to Catherine Cookson. Woohoo! It's not that long, so I think it might just, I'll be back probably next week with my review on that. All right then, everyone. Bye.